Hi, 5th grade. So this is going to be your first math video for this year. We are going to be doing the next part of Module 1, Lesson 1 for Eureka Math. We are going to be continuing with our place value charts. Just the only difference this time is that we are going to be multiplying instead of dividing. So I'm going to give you some examples of what this looks like. We're first going to be starting off with our place value chart, and you can use yours to work along with me, and you can also write notes in your math notebook. But what we're going to be starting with is 4/10 times 10. And remember, when we say these decimals, I don't want to say 0.4. What I want to say is the place value so I know what number I'm talking about, and so I can correctly place it onto my place value chart. So if you can see right here, since I have 4 in my tenths place, I'm going to put my 4 in the tenths place on my place value charts. And the problem that I have is I need to solve for 4/10 times 10. So I am trying to find what 4/10 times 10 is going to equal. I know that when I figure out what 4/10 times 10 is, I'm going to be figuring out a number that is 10 times as big as 4/10. So that is my problem right now. Now, something that I can think about when I'm trying to figure out what 4/10 times 10 is I can take a look at it in unit form like this. So I can solve for 4/10, and I write it out in unit form like this, 4/10 times 10. And in this situation, what we're going to think about is we're just going to think about what is 4 times 10. And we know that 4 times 10 is 40. So I'm going to put this answer right here. And I would like you to write this in your notes as well. So what I'm left with is 40/10. Now that number may seem really confusing to you, and that's okay. I'm going to show you some other strategies as well if this doesn't make any sense. So if I have 40/10, what I can think of that as is, let's say I have my unit cubes again, just like we did this morning. I know that if I have 40/10, I could say that this is 10/10. This is another 10/10, so this all together would be 20/10. This all together would be 30/10. And this right here would be 40/10. Now, if I have 10/10, 10/10 all together is the same thing as 1 whole. So if this is 10/10, that equals 1 whole. This would then equal 2 wholes. This would equal 3 wholes. And this all together would equal 4 wholes. If I have 4 wholes together, that is the same thing as 4 ones. And if I wanted to write this number in unit form onto my place value chart, I can also write 40/10 on my chart as well, because the way I would do that is if I saw 40/10, I wouldn't just put the 4 right here. That's not correct. If I did that, that would just read as 4/10. And I don't just have 4/10. What I have is 4D/10, so I can put it at 0 here. I have my place value here, or my decimal point here, so I'd have 4.0 or 4 ones or 40/10. So there's some different ways to say our numbers. So just to recap, we started off with 4/10. I was multiplying it by 10, and I was trying to find a number that was 10 times larger than 4/10. So I did 4/10 times 10, and that gave me 40/10, which is equal to 4 wholes or 4 ones. And this tells me that 4 ones is 10 times larger than 4/10. All right, now I'm going to do the next one with you as well, and then you're going to do the very last one by yourself. So I'm going to erase this. And now my next problem says that I have 4/100. This number 4 is in my 100th place. So I'm going to place this number 4 in my 100th place right here. Since I have a place value that is not filled in my decimals, I'm going to go ahead and fill that. So now I have 0.04 or 4 hundredths. And what I'm going to do now is I need to multiply by 10 and figure out how much 4 hundredths times 10 is going to equal. I am trying to find a number that is 10 times larger than 4 hundredths. And you might start seeing a pattern here. When I multiply by 10, I just want to move over one place value. Just like when I multiplied that 4 tenths, I just moved over one place value into my ones. So right now we have 4 hundredths, and I'm multiplying it by 10. Just like last time, we learned that 4 times 10 is 40, so I'm going to put this number here. Except my unit is a little bit different now, because I started with a different unit. So if I have 40 hundredths, I have some different options for how I can think about this. My first option is I can write this number into my place value chart. So remember, I wouldn't want to put the 4 right here, because if I put the 4 right here, I'm just rewriting 4 hundredths. If I'm writing 40 hundredths, then I will write the 4 here and the 0 here so that I have it in the hundredths place. And if I wrote the 4 in this place value, that means that I will look up at my place value and see that I now have 4 tenths in my place value chart, or I could also read this as 40 hundredths in my place value chart. Another way you can think about this is you can just simply look at your place value chart and think about what is 10 times larger than 4 hundredths. 4 tenths would be 10 times larger than 4 hundredths. And another way you can think about this is if I were to take my unit cubes and write 1 hundredth on them, I know that 10 hundredths is the same thing as 1 tenth. So here is 10 hundredths, 1 tenth altogether made up of hundredths. Here is another group of hundredths that will make up a tenth, so now I have 2 tenths. Here is another group of hundredths that can make up a whole tenth. And then here is another group of hundredths that can make up a full tenth. And all together, I have 4 tenths. Now, for the very last one, I want you to try this one on your own. I'll help you set it up. But after that, I want you to think about what is the right answer and write that in your notes. So for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way to the thousandths place now. So this number right here, this 4, is in the thousandths place, and this is 4 thousandths. So I'm going to come all the way over here, and I'm going to write this 4 in the thousandths place. And since I'm multiplying it by 10, I just need to move it over one place value. I'm just making a number that is 10 times greater, and I know the numbers just to the left of the unit I'm looking at are 10 times greater than the place value over here. So I'm going to think about what 4 thousandths times 10 equals, and then figure out my answer on my place value chart from there. So go ahead and pause the video, find the answer, and please put it into your notebook. So you should have the answer in your notebook by now. And we're going to take a look at this problem. So I have 4 thousandths times 10. So again, 4 times 10 is 40. And I have 40 thousandths, which means that the 0 should be in my thousandths place value. This 4 will be in my hundredths. And I'll also want a 0 in this tenths because I don't want any empty place values. And what I'm left with is 40 thousandths. Another way I can think about this problem is I can think about it as 4 hundredths is 10 times greater than 4 thousandths. And again, I can use my place value unit cubes. And I can think of this as, well, if I have this group of thousands here, this whole group of thousands can equal 1/100th. And this group is 10 times greater. Then I can also look at this and think of this as 1/100th. This is another hundredth, and this is another hundredth right here. All together, I have 4 hundredths, and this is 10 times greater than 4 thousandths. I am going to reset the board so that we can move on to another problem, but please remember, if you ever have any questions, please raise your hand and ask for help. All right, 5th grade, so for our next problem, again, you're going to be following along in your place value chart and writing notes as we go. So right now what we have is 6 ones. So I have 6, and I'm going to be now dividing by 10. So what I want is I want a number that is 1/10 as large as 6 ones. And when I am dividing by 10, I only need to move over 1 place value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my little arrow going this way. I'm going to write dividing by 10. And if I have 6 ones divided by 10, what this is going to become, we just need to follow our arrow, is this is going to become 6/10. And if I want to write that as an answer, all I would need to do is write it like this, 0.6 or 6/10. And we can see that our decimal place is right here, so that's how I know where my decimal place is supposed to be at. Now, how about if I had, we're going to change this up just a wee bit. What if I had my 6 ones divided by 100? What this means now is that I want to find a number that is 1/100th as large as 6 ones. So I want to find a smaller number right now, because I am finding a number that is 1/100th the times of, or 1/100th as large as my 6 ones. Now if I am dividing something by 100ths, what I can do in that situation is I can move over 2 times on my place value chart. So I'm going to move through this box, because that would just be 10 times. And I'm going to stop in this box right here, because this box right here is 2 times over. So this is my tens, and then I have hundredths right there. And if I have a hundredth right here, then that means that I can stop with my 6. I'll bring it down. It's kind of like Chutes and Ladders almost. So I have my 6 ones. I divided them by 100, and now this became 6 hundredths. So now I have 6 hundredths, but it's very important that I make sure I put the 0 right here, because if I were just to write my answer as 0.6, then I would only have 6/10 as my answer again. And my answer in this situation is 6 hundredths. So I'll write this over here. Please make sure you're writing this down in your notes, and then you are going to get a problem to solve now. So this problem is going to be 6 ones divided by 1,000. So you're going to divide it by 1,000. So you are trying to think about a number that would make 6 ones 1,000th as large. So you're going to probably have your answer somewhere over here, but we want our number to be 1,000th of the size. So I'm going to have you pause the video right now, solve this problem in your notebooks. You can use your place value chart as well and find the answer. All right, 5th grade, if you got the correct answer, you should be looking at something that looks like this, and you should have 6 thousandths, because 6 thousandths is 1,000th of the size of 6 ones. So I moved over 1, 2, 3 place values, and so we went 10, hundredths, thousandths, and over here we are left with 6 thousandths. Remember, I don't want to leave these place values empty, because if I do, then I'm not going to get the correct answer. And we write 6 thousandths like So if you have this as your final answer, then you have it correct. I'm going to be putting up a couple of other examples, and then after that, you'll be moving on to the problem sets. All right, 5th grade, so we're on to our next set of problems, and we are back to multiplying. So we want our numbers to be 10 times greater, 100 times greater, and then 1,000 times greater than our starting number. Our starting number for these problems is going to be 2 and 43 hundredths. So 2 and 43 hundredths. Remember, we see that decimal, we say ands. And when I'm doing a 2 and 43 hundredths is I'm going to be multiplying by 10. So I want to find a number that is 10 times greater than 2 and 43 hundredths, which might seem a little bit difficult. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking it a place value at a time and moving each place value over, so that is becoming 10 times greater. And remember, when I am making a number 10 times greater, I am moving over into the next place value. So I am moving over into the larger place value because I want my number to be larger. So right here, I have 2 times 10, and I'm going to do that 2 times 10, so I have 2 ones times 10, so that is going to give me 2 tenths, which I will put over here because 2 tenths, oopsies, is the same thing as 20, and right here I have 2 tenths. Then I am going to multiply 4 tenths, and we should remember that from earlier. So if I take 4 tenths and multiply them by 10, that leaves me with 4 ones. And then if I take these 3 hundredths right here and I multiply my 3 hundredths times 10, I am left with 30 tenths, or just 3 tenths, like that. Now I want to pay attention to this decimal place now, because if you take a look at these numbers, you're going to see that my numbers have all shifted. And since my numbers have shifted, that means that my decimal place is going to be in a different spot. So instead of having 2 and 43 hundredths, I now have 2 tens, 4 ones, and 3 tenths, which leaves me with 24 and 3 tenths. So I'm going to write this over here as this answer, 24 and 3 tenths. Now what you are going to do is you're going to go ahead and erase this, except this time, instead of just multiplying by 10, you're going to be multiplying by 100. So think about how many times are you going to shift your place values over, and you want a number that is 100 times greater than 2 and 43 hundredths. So go ahead and pause the video, and in your notes and with your place value charts, I want you to try and figure out what would a number that is 100 times greater than 2 and 43 hundredths look like. Alright, now I set up my place value chart so I can fit my answer on it. But if we did it correctly, then we took each place value and we found what that would be if we made it 100 times larger. So if I took 2 ones and I multiply that by 100, I'm left with 2 hundredths. Then if I took 4 tenths and I made that 100 times greater, I would be left with 4 tenths. And if I took my 3 hundredths and multiplied those by 100, I am left with 3 ones. And as you can see, since I multiplied by 100, I moved over 2 place values instead for each of my place values, each of my digits that I had in my original number. So now the number I'm left with is 243. And I can write that just like so. So if you got that right, give yourself a pat on the back. And of course, if you need any help, please make sure you're raising your hand and asking for help. We're going to move on to the last problem for this section. And for this last problem, you're taking the same number, 2 and 43 hundredths, and you're going to be multiplying it by 1,000. So let's see what you can do. Make sure you're also using the place value chart to help you out. All Alright, so 5th grade, finally, what we are left with is 2 and 43/100 times 1,000. So I am trying to find a number that is 1,000 times larger than this 2 and 43/100. So what I did on my place value chart is I still have that original number in its starting spot, but when I am multiplying by 1,000, I am moving over now 3 spaces on my place value chart. So we had our tens, our hundreds, and then the thousands. So I moved this over 3 times, over 3 place values. So these 2 ones times 1,000 became 2 thousands. These 4 tenths times 1,000 became 4 hundredths. My 3 hundredths times 1,000 became 3 tens. And then what was very important is that originally what I had is this empty space right here. And I don't like empty spaces in between my decimal place and the rest of my number on either side. So I always want to make sure that I fill up those empty place values in between my decimal points with a 0 so that my number is complete. And what I'm left with right here is 2,430, and that is my final answer. 2,430 is 1,000 times greater than 2 and 43/100. I will be putting up your final problem for today's lesson up on the board, and once you have totally finished that problem, you will then move on to the problem set after checking in with me. All right, 5th grade, you're on to the very last problem, finally, of our lesson. You guys have been doing great so far. What you are going to do for this problem is you are going to be taking this number, 745, and you are dividing it by 10, 100, and 1,000. So remember, you're going to be making your number smaller, which means that you're going to be moving towards the decimal parts of your place value charts. So if I'm dividing by 10, then, like for example, these 5 ones are going to then move over 10 to a tenth, a number 10th as large as the one here. So we're going to keep moving over based on the number that we are dividing by. So I want a number that is 10th as large as 745. I want a number that is 100th as large as 745. And I want a number that is 1,000th as large as 745 for this one. Go ahead and do this work in your place value charts and in your math notebook. I will come around and check your answer after you raise your hand for me, and then I'll give you the directions for the problem set. Great job today, and if you need any help, please let me know.